I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the lore breakdown of 3 different abnormalities, each from a different flaw. There'll be something more interesting, if you don't like this, in part 18. I promise you that. Next we have Ozma. Now, this is another new abnormality. One that's part of the Twisted Wizard of Oz set. In the source material, Princess Osma was the immortal true ruler of Oz, but when she was a baby, she was turned into a boy called Tip, or Tepetarius, by Mombi, the Wicked Witch of the North, to prevent her from ascending the throne, and Tip knew no better. He also created Jack Pumpkinhead, his artificial child, made by the powder of life that Mombi tested on him, which was what gave life of his own to this creation of Tip. In the end, Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, found this out and made Mombi change Tip back into Osma. That must have been a shock. I mean, think about it. If for all of your life you thought you were male, and you didn't know much better, and then you're turned into a girl, finding out you were supposed to be a girl in the first place. That'd be quite a shock, at least initially, wouldn't it? Although there are some story elements within the author's story, the author's books. Some of these elements contradict or are unclear. I mean, in some illustrations, she even had a different hair colour. Even the author wasn't that clear. Well, we're going off topic, so let's move on and talk about how she was in the library. The twisted version of Osma was the true ruler of the Emerald City, until the Wicked Wizard took everything from her. All she had left now was Jack, a pumpkin, given life by the powder of life, where it's implied that she's lost more than her throne. She's either lost the use of her legs or had them removed. She's also lost her mind due to her banishment by the Wicked Wizard, where even that wasn't enough torment. She was also punished by no one talking to her, so she sought to claim the librarians to alleviate her loneliness. She has 4 Jacks, but only one of these is the real one. Ozma will be able to have damage exposed to her after unleashing her wrath on the librarians that take out the real one. She could also make one of the librarians forget, likely a reference to the Fountain of Oblivion from the source material, which was the solution suggested by the Scarecrow to make Ozma's enemy forget about their wicked intent. Also, if they don't defeat the real Jack fast enough, he'll take on whatever key page and abilities that librarian had. Osma spoke of a single person taking everything from her, like the Wicked Wizard. and all that was left was her children. When she made a librarian forget, she told them that it would make them feel the same. What, like feeling a blank slate? Yeah, she wanted to be the one that took things away, giving them new lives, all so that she wouldn't be lonely. In that case, that would make her no better than the wicked wizard that took things from her. When the real Jack was defeated, she would feel outraged, not being able to forgive the librarians, comparing them to the wicked wizard, not wanting them to take what was left of hers. At the start of the battle, Jessette noted that Jack was the only thing left to stay with her, and he didn't like defeating her that much, knowing enough about her backstory. As for her assistants, they couldn't guess the preferences of Osma as they haven't seen her before. They guessed that someone put a curse on her, so it's more likely that her legs withered due to that curse. A curse that probably didn't make her look all that healthy, considering her overall appearance. It was a curse likely given to her by the wicked wizard that usurped her. Upon taking her out, they weren't comfortable with this. It was a Pyrrhic victory. Ozma's battle stage was a hollow building that looked like a castle, full of archways and pillars, with a bright light and a transparent reflective floor. It would be foolish to just assume that this would be the last she would be seen in any form. Next we have the Judgement Bird. Now this is the third of the Black Forest Trinity. Its way of protecting the forest from the beasts that would threaten it was to pass judgment on those that it encountered. Now, this bird might look like the avian embodiment of justice, as its eyes were given to the big bird, but it used scales that were guaranteed to point towards guilty, due to one side being heavier than the other. It then did something that not even the judges of Megacity 1 would do to sentence criminals to death. It hung the guilty. This self-appointed judge, jury, and executioner helped to cause what it tried to prevent, much like the other two. In the facility, when this abnormality breaches, it would damage the soul of any within the same room or corridor, and those killed by this attack were hanged. In the library, it has runaway birds as its minions. It's best for the librarians not to get hit, as this would result in sin being transferred to those that get hit, due to the Judgement Bird performing instant death on those with a certain amount of sin, which otherwise counters attacks with blocking. Thankfully, Bainar was able to exploit its weakness, using the power of fairies to make it take damage each time it moved, regardless of whether it took the beating or dished it out. And a good thing too, because sin would be accumulated each scene. And If the librarians didn't deal with the Judgement Bird quickly, they would be quickly wiped out. When the Judgement Bird appears, it fears that beasts would ransack the forest, and not let anyone get eaten by them. It sought to protect the forest, to bring peace. And when using its target-specific attack, it believed that the scales showed a clear verdict. With sound judgment, it weighed their sins. Yeah. As for the runaway birds, they see the big bird as one who always watches. Freedom was non-existent within the Black Forest, where the long bird, which was what the Judgement Bird was, had scales that weren't fair at all. Tell us something we don't know. As for the small bird, what the punishment bird was, it delivered scary punishments. Well, it didn't get that scary until it was provoked, in which case it ate those that attacked it. As for what Bainar thought of this, she saw it as curious to fight it. Certainly as it was once dormant. And when it was defeated, she complimented her assistants and told them to return for a break, likely involving some black tea. As for her assistants, they know not to lower their guard, regardless of how weakened the Judgement Bird is. They certainly didn't trust its judgments, and who can blame them? This was due to the scale tilted to one side, and just the sound of it chills them. When it's defeated, they ask what it means to be fair, and they understood that the Judgement Bird had innocent motives. But what it did was far from innocent. They even questioned what justice is. Well, it's not easily answered, even in reality. As for the Judgement Bird stage, it resembles the Black Forest, much like with the other two. All Bainar could do was wait. Wait for Roland to pay her a visit. Then we have the Blue Star, one of the more dangerous of the abnormalities. Well, it's certainly an Aleph type. This abnormality has an unknown origin, but it's one that attacks the mind and thrives on faith. Those who lose their minds to this are drawn into it. In the facility, it required someone to either be lower than level 5 prudence, or to work on it longer than a minute. Both of these are conditions to make it breach, and when it breaches, it constantly attacks the minds of everyone within the facility, until all are killed, or it suppressed. Now, while the facility encouraged club activity that promoted positivity, there was to be no idolizing, no worship, nothing should be considered sacred, and those considered blacklisted needed to take 3 days of mental treatment and to receive punishment accordingly. likely due to either working on this abnormality or another without authorization. This was actually due to one employee wanting to throw themselves at Blue Star to become a martyr to it. In the library, it's not fought directly. Its followers are, and each one that gets staggered is immediately killed. And the shrine to the Blue Star loses a tenth of its maximum HP. There's no other way of defeating this. This is made harder by the Blue Star attacking everyone every 3 scenes, giving some stagger gauge back to its followers. Oh, and as each one is defeated, another replaces them. Oh, and it loses a tenth of HP regardless of who gets staggered, whether it be the librarians or the followers. Although it's not a good idea to let the librarians get staggered. The worshippers see all of them as sinners that need to return to the Blue Star to cleanse themselves, to go back to where they belonged, believing it to be an instinct. Yeah, religious zealotry where people throw themselves on the sacrificial furnace. Except in this case, it's more literal. When the sound of a star mass attack is used, every 3 scenes, they speak of the wondrous sound, a nostalgic echo, that which is calling them, the call guiding them to the place that would accept them. I think we can see why Roland sees religion in the city as scams. Hockmer saw that if his assistant's faith is strong enough, they would not be tempted by this. And upon defeating it, he advised rest and reorganization after they've snapped out of it. As for his assistants, they feared being dragged into it if they didn't keep their senses, remembering that it sucked up employees, noting that fanatics are inside and outside of the library. Upon defeating it, they saw the Blue Stars revolting, although they felt like missing it. Yeah, best reaffirm your priorities there, lest you get drawn into it again. As for the Blue Stars stage, it's pitch black with the Blue Star in the middle, where there's a swirly effect around it with particles spinning, something that indicates the sound it made. All Hockmer could do after that was wait. Finally, let's focus our attention on R Corp. There is the question of what R Corp's singularity is. Something to do with how they maintain numbers in any battle. Well, this shall be covered in this part of the lore breakdown. The story continues with Nikolai speaking of Mio being the only one remaining in the R Corp hatchery, where Rudolph acknowledged this. Maxim then asked Rudolph if he wanted to bet which Mio would win, and Rudolph was surprised how he's not sick of doing that. He dislikes the rabid hair, and not just due to the scene that he doesn't like seeing. Well, wait. Which Mio? as in more than one, considering there's Mio 13, Mio 52, Mio 4213, Mio 795, and Hatchery? Anyway, the fourth pack was working with TCore. Yeah, those with the singularity to do with time, where they were using the TT2 protocol at full output for 1 day. And that cost a lot of energy, considering the power shortage that was going on. They usually have a week. But according to Nikolai, time, even with TT2 protocol, was short for them. And according to Maxim, 1 day of real time is 3 months within the area of space where TT2 protocol is in operation. Yeah, this is about 100 times normal speed. And there are 5,000 Mios. Yeah, that's right. R Corp's singularity is rapid cloning. They can make a clone army faster than Camino in Star Wars can make them. And no training is needed, as they seem to have a backup of the neuroscan of the original, which is why they don't need to have years of education or, well, the maturation is accelerated. So it doesn't take 10 years to make a full clone, probably closer to 10 minutes. And considering what TT2 protocol was like for 1 day, that would mean it'd be about 1 year and 9 months if they had a full week. And in that case, they had 10,000 copies. Yeah, imagine that. 10,000 copies of yourself fighting and killing each other in a battle royale type situation. And Maxim said that this time, with only 1 day and 5,000 copies, they had it easy. And when he said that, 2,500 Mios were dead. As for the Mios still in combat, they were enjoying mass suicide a bit too much, barely able to contain the excitement. As this was happening, the TCore researcher explained the terms and conditions a second time. Apparently there's a cloning law established by the head, where no more than one of the same individual may exist in the city for longer than a week, clone or original, where violating this rule, a rule specifically to R Corps, well, at least it seems that way, that it's intended with R Corp in mind. This would result in its wing qualification being revoked and shut down as per B Corp's regulations. Yeah, and this week is in real time, not TT2 time, so that's why the services of T Corp was needed for the different teams. Yeah, I'm thinking that this cloning law is likely to make sure that R Corp doesn't try anything and take over with numbers. As even with the claws and the arbiters, numbers would wear them down. Yeah, it's not just money that prevents that. It's the threat of being destroyed. They then continue to watch the Mios fight each other and kill each other. Not only enjoying this, but also eating each other just to survive, due to not being supplied with food. They'd be at home in District 23. Yeah, again with the cannibalism. Well, this is probably to make sure that the surviving Mio is self-sufficient. Apparently they killed each other. The purpose of this, rather, is to produce the fittest Mio, as some would lose their mind after killing themselves multiple times. Yeah, clones of the same people can act differently due to differing experiences. Everyone has their breaking points. It's just a matter of how much and with what. Where killing is the only way to survive in the hatchery. The other TCore researcher advised them to be more frugal with the use of the cloning machine in the hatchery. This was due to R Corp going down, which made power scarce for everyone. Well, TCore and W Corp was likely in the same position. Yeah, certainly W Corp, as it was previously stated. R Corp was apparently generous with what it provided, up until it suddenly shut down. After all that, or rather after talking about all that, the few surviving Mios emerged, talking about how they were shocked about killing themselves, but got desensitized to it, making it easier to kill others. But it was annoying to wake up every time with all the memories of struggling to survive. Yeah, it's literally the life of the original flashing before their eyes. They were speaking of the Red Mist's advice to withstand her hellish childhood before R Corp. The advice is, or rather was, it's not the strong who survive, it's the survivors who are strong. After fangirling over the Red Mist, they focused on business, and the last Mios fought each other to the death. Then the first TCore researcher said that it might be the last time that the fourth pack could hatch, as if they failed again, there would not be another chance. Largely because they'd be wiped out by the superiors. Yeah, their superiors would wipe them out, possibly using the Ravens, that internal affairs group within R Corp. Nikolai expected this, as there would be no power left. As they were talking about this, there was only two remaining, the most determined of the batch. And after Mio 635 won, Rudolph greeted her. Mio asked why he would. Maxim was annoyed by this, and Mio understood this as them making another bet. Apparently the bet was whoever lost would pay the tab next time they got drinks. Apparently Maxim bet on Mio 17 due to her keen senses. The Mio with them agreed that she was a tricky foe, and making sure that Maxim was paying for her drink as well. Maxim understood, as that was the terms of the bet. Then they focused on the suicide mission to the library that they were about to take, to pay the librarians back for killing them the first time. Roland, at this point, was surprised when he realized that R Corp's singularity was cloning. Angela questioned him why they had a rule of two of the same person not being able to exist in well, at the same time for longer than a week. Well, personally, I think it's less of a rule and more a vindictive pronouncement. Okay, that's being unfair. It seems more like a failsafe to protect the head from R Corp. Roland didn't know, and he didn't want to know. Angela thought that if cloning dead humans was possible, why did Ian create Angela and the Sephiroth? Well, with the Sephiroth, he likely cloned the brains to put in the robot bodies, as the robot bodies were more durable. As for you, it's likely because an AI can do it better than a human. That and they won't break psychologically. Well, not as easily. That and he appeared to want to give the head the finger regarding their rules. Specifically, the one rule that most would not even think of violating. Yeah, the AI Ethics Amendment, which even extends to artificial bodies that aren't cloned. Roland theorized that the technology might have its flaws, as in different steps, might need some sort of permit. It might even be more complicated than it appears. Where, as far as he's concerned, it seems like Ian's idea might have been the best option that was available. And he understood that it's fine as long as there's no more than one of the same person existing for longer than a week. Then Angela saw that what the clones experienced was similar to what she went through, Roland noting how ruthlessly they were used, asking if what would be coming their way would be stronger than the ones that were fought previously. Angela wasn't sure, as they were elites competing against thousands of themselves and came on top. So, it's certainly not going to be a pushover. Then they arrived, and it happened much as it did before, with Rudolph noting how heavy the air felt, Maxim comparing the atmosphere to that of the ruins, and Rudolph stating that a starveless city is not much different from the ruins in terms of danger. But it was different this time around, as Nikolai noted that they all died there once. Even so, Mio was excited to graze some fresh grass, and Nikolai told Mio to shut her hole for 5 minutes. Then Angela greeted them again. Nikolai greeted her, and Angela noted that she said that last time. This surprised Nikolai, and then Mio told Angela that it had been a while, that she'd dropped the formalities since the contract's over. Angela asked her if there was any problem. This confused Mio as she didn't know what she was talking about. Angela then addressed the countless clones of herself being killed. Nikolai asked how much she knew. Angela asked, how could they remain sane as they're humans? How could their minds not collapse? Rudolph understood that she was aware of R Corp's singularity. Yeah, R Corp's singularity, and Nikolai understood this as well, due to the power of the library, asking if Angela is surprised with their way of life. Well, it seems that way to those sheltered within that environment, like her, sheltered like a precious flower. It's nothing like what they've experienced. Maxim claimed to have no problem enduring it. Angela was resentful of that, as they knew nothing of her life. Mio then acted like a little and agreed with that. agreed that they know all about that, telling her to not be such a little crybaby and just get on with it. They don't want to die twice there. Not giving a about how she lived and didn't want to waste time listening to that story. Angela understood that this was the life in the city, and that was based on what Roland told her. Nikolai understood this as well. Angela then ushered R Corp, or more specifically its fourth pack, or what's left of it, in. Oh yes, and Mio has a backstory, which was went over briefly. But let's go over that in more detail. Her story started when she was a child and there was a battle between the major syndicates. And guess where she was during that one? Right in the middle of it. The area was packing more heat than Ghost Naga chili powder and was much more dangerous. It was also fierce and intimidating. She was shivering in the corner. Not as equipped to deal with the horrors of the backstreets, much as another inhabitant that we know. There was no gap to run through, no hiding spots. All she could do was crouch into a ball and hope that no one noticed her. Well, if she was hoping for divine intervention, they voted to walk out as a syndicate member spotted her. She was afraid that it was the end. Now, here's what I think about this situation. If they were feeling particularly merciful, they'd just kill her and be done with it. If they were all out of mercy, they'd sell her into prostitution. The other possibilities in between are a long drawn-out death via torture, along with given the choice to join them or die. Who knows, there might be syndicates that work that way, for all we know. Thankfully, a sword was slicing through their morally bankrupt flesh, and they were dead. She realized that she was alive. This was thanks to one who was covered in blood. The blood of her enemies. The enemies that she was cutting through. This was Kali, the Red Mist. And based on the fact that her massive blade was described as weird, this was likely the mimicry prototype that she was wielding. So this was after Carmen recruited her, when she was a grade 2 fixer, but before her final battle. Anyway, with the syndicate thugs taken care of, Mio could leave. And Kali pointed to the alleyway with her sword and basically told her, "Get your down that alley and you might be able to save yourself today." Mio struggled to speak, intimidated by this woman. She noticed this. As Mio collapsed on the floor, she grabbed her arm, got her back up and told her, "It's not the strong who survive, it's the survivors who are strong." Then she started running, feeling embarrassed. She remembered that day since, and eventually found her way to get into a recruitment town, and eventually got recruited by R Corp. Well, we know the rest after that, don't we? As for Maxim, he had something to say about the previous R Corp. As far as power distribution was concerned, they were tighter than a boa constrictor around Mr. Fantastic's neck. And it wasn't just R Corp that was about it. It was other wings as well. W Corp had to raise prices and run fewer trains due to a lack of power to run more. F Corp was unable to experiment with their ferries, as in what Binar and the Arbiters use. because of a lack of power. Other wings were either too afraid or too polite to say what they thought about the previous R Corp. The problem was, there wasn't really many competitors, if any. At least not at that point. In fact, it was said that there was a power company that generated power by tapping into hell, while in a different game series that had resulted in an invasion. Here, it attracted the most powerful abnormality known to exist. You know what they say about monopolies? If you don't have to compete, you don't have to care. As for why they weren't changed over, few had the courage to do so, as the last thing they'd want is a war between wings. Then there was a massive amount of fumes, and not the kinds that the factories chug out. Yeah, clearly environmentalist groups in this universe either died out or were outlawed. This smoke was having an adverse effect on everyone. People were wishing for the happiness of others, or just zoning out. At worst, they looked sick, with signs of it all over their bodies, and started wandering around. Reminds me of the origin story of the Dreams of the Black Swan. It even included ridiculously unhealthy work hours. This all makes sense now. Rudolph provided some insight into the cloning technology of R Corp, where they made a promise with the head that no more than two of the same person can exist in the city longer than a week. Rudolph could understand why two or more of the same person shouldn't exist, but as for the timer, it's unlikely to be some kind of ethic, as the head are a bunch of morally bankrupt. It's more likely to make sure that R Corp isn't building a clone army that could potentially overthrow the head or start a war between wings that could make them afraid that they might take over. Well, it's not just because they can be bought off that prevents them from doing something like this. As for the cloning, they select the fittest from the hatchery, where up to thousands fight to the death, and they engage in self-catering, where the quality of those that end up making the grade depends on the size of the population and the time that's used to train them. This scared him, due to the fact that he was thinking this way, where there's no fear of death, as death will come for all. But that doesn't mean that he'd go down without a fight. Also, that fear changed to weariness, as he was asking, is this the real life? Okay, let's move on before we start singing Bohemian Rhapsody. As for Nikolai, it turned out that the fourth pack was the problem child of R Corp, a thorn in the management's backsides. Yet they lacked a good enough excuse to get rid of them, as those under her were all up in the head. It took a while to get them up to an acceptable standard. The Rhino team were powerful, destructive, but easy to provoke and can demolish what wasn't meant to be demolished. The Reindeer team could be just as likely to fry the brains of their allies as they can their enemies, and even themselves, especially if they suffer a nervous breakdown. Then we have the Rabbit team, full of blood knights, as friendly fire was an ever-present risk. The fourth pack had a unique niche, fighting the ridiculous. Yet clearly there are situations where chaos is a good thing to have, seeing as orthodox battles would do more harm than good if they were to get involved. Then we get to the current situation, as they were told that they were going to be destroyed due to the energy shortage. This didn't surprise Nikolai, although one thing that was strange was that the one that told her wasn't even a part of R Corp. She had a pair of red eyes and dashing brown hair. Oh, me. It's her, isn't it? It's certainly not Mio. She has white hair. It's also not Kali, as she was long gone there. That and she has red hair. R Corp put up more of a fight than last time, but they were all taken down, and that was the end of the fourth pack of R Corp, saving the Ravens the trouble. Angela then asked Roland if she was being a crybaby, feeling insecure about what Mio said. Roland didn't think so, at all, as he's seen how her life has gone, well, indirectly. Angela was starting to feel scared due to the anguish that she was bearing. Was something that any could stomach, but she was making a big deal out of it. Yeah, there are some things that even you aren't desensitized to yet. This was due to them saying that they've been through worse, at least as far as combat was concerned. She asked if it was because she was lacking experience, which is why she's suffering the agony over what was nothing to them. Roland advised her to not let it bother her. Her agony was the only thing that mattered right now. Well, he's not wrong, considering that now R Corp were books. And she's still around. She should remember the pain and keep moving forward, not letting what others say get to her, as there are other people's standards. She shouldn't give a about them. Angela asked if different people deal with it in different ways. Roland said, that's basically it. They set their own standards and accuse others of weakness. It's best to ignore it. Angela felt better after that. Roland was telling her what he believes in. Yeah, how did that go so far? Although, surprisingly, that's good advice. Okay. The abnormalities took less time than I thought, so I decided to put the second half of R Corp at the end. Next will be something more fiery. Until next time, hail the rabbit!